Sacramento City Council, West Sacramento Redevelopment Successor Agency, and the West Sacramento Financing Authority of October 18th. We're going to start, first of all, we had a closed session meeting before this. Mr. City Attorney, would you please report out?
Yes, the council met in closed session to confer with their real property negotiator concerning property at 2925 Ramco Street. No action was taken.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll start the meeting with a pledge of allegiance. Mr. City Manager. All right, first item on the agenda is presentations by the public of matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the council. And at this point, the council is prohibited from discussing issues not on the agenda brought to them at this time. According to the Brown Act, are there any members of the public who would like to make a presentation? All right, seeing none, I will go on to agenda item 1B, council communications and assignments. Any reports out?
No report for me. No.
No reports? Okay, I just have one. Air Quality Management District met on October 11th. We received a wildfire update. Of course, there's an air quality issue. Most of it is coming out of Vacaville and Winters, which apparently hit 12 times the federal floor for particle material 2.5 standard. And that was it for that. All right, thank you. Item 1C is council appointments, reappointments, removals. There are none today, so we'll move on to item number 2, which is a Public Works Administration and consideration of presentation by Caltrans. So I believe that Caltrans has moved this item.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, Caltrans was asked if they could make that presentation on November 1st.
All right. Questions? Okay, thank you. All right, then on to the consent agenda. Are there any items council members would like to pull for separate consideration, or is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, passes. Thank you. On to item number 12. This is a public hearing in consideration of Resolution 17-1660, amending the book of fees for various regulatory activities, products, and services. Mr. Wright. Oh, Nitish. Oh, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. Nitish Sharma with the City Finance Division. Today we are requesting the City Council to conduct a public hearing and adopt Resolution 1760, amending the Book of Fees to adopt charges for various regulatory activities. As mentioned before, fees total about $42 million, which is 32% of total operating revenues of $130 million. A number of city services are almost entirely dependent on the fee revenues to operate and provide day-to-day services. A small contribution is made from the general fund to these funds to offset costs that are not recovered by the fee revenues. Regular updates to the fee schedules are necessary to ensure that expenses match with the revenues and limit contribution from the general fund. The fee amendments in most schedules are due to 3 primary reasons. As mentioned, fees have not been updated for a number of years, and therefore revenues are not matching with the cost. The fees charged do not include an unanticipated major increase in benefits cost, for example, PERS and workers' comp, and proper allocation between user groups, including minor changes to ensure fees are easy to understand. Staff presented these proposed amendments to the Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee last month. There are no significant direction from the Chamber board members. On September 20th, staff presented as a workshop the proposed fee amendments, and council provided direction at that time. On 28th September, staff presented the same report to the Economic Development and Housing Commission, and staff got some input from the commissioners. The direction from council and commissioners have been incorporated in this report that is for approval today. This concludes my presentation. We are respectfully recommending the City Council to conduct a public hearing and adopt Resolution 1760, amending the Book of Fees.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Sharma before we go to public hearing? Just one quick question, if I can. A number of these, you basically increased the amount of the fees to cover past practices where you'd actually have to go out for collection. So, for example, the parcel map deposit was $450, now it's $2,000. The final map was $600, now it's $5,000. So are these retainers or are they actual fees?
I will actually have Charlene Hamilton answer that question for you.
It's an actual deposit, and then we open up a work order number, and we charge staff's time and consultant time in some cases, such as the city surveyor, to the work order number. And so the deposit increases that we're proposing, we reviewed kind of on the average what it takes to process a parcel map or a final map, and so we're adjusting those deposits to more align with the actual costs that we've been experiencing, and also to be more transparent to the public on what they can expect.
Okay,
So if in fact it goes faster or there's not as much, then they will be given a refund.
okay, yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilmember Roscoe.
Thank you. Thank you, Nitish, for your hard work on this proposal to all of us. I did take a chance to reread it, and I know that during the last time you presented to our council, I had some comments. Today, I'm going to limit my comments only to the false alarm fees. Earlier, I had expressed my concern that having a change from a first false alarm with no fine, but a second false alarm with a fine of $50 and then an increase thereafter could possibly have a perverse effect of discouraging folks who were very interested in maintaining the security of their home, but maybe due to their either physical limitations or the age of a house, or maybe the inability to reach the alarm company to have an alarm retracted before police were called, that it could have a negative impact on their willingness to pay for an alarm system. And I don't want to discourage anyone from doing that, especially folks who can't afford a steep fee. And for many, $50 is a significant amount. I did a little bit of research in other jurisdictions in the nearby region, including Sacramento, Dixon, Elk Grove, Rancho Cordova, and it appears that they have a fee system that has a first and second alarm fees that are free, but then jump from 75 to 100, 200, and 250. My question is, is there a specific reason why we had the jump to $50 for a second alarm, and if it's just as reasonable to say have an increase on the third alarm, so that we're truly focusing the fee recovery to those who are repeat offenders who might be reckless in not paying more attention to their false alarm systems, or their alarm systems being falsely reported?
It's a good point. We actually looked at this, and in 1 year comparison from October of 2016 to October 18th of 2017, of 1,863 false alarm, 640 were residential, and 1,223 were commercial, which is 11%. So as you can see, a number of false alarms are coming from commercial properties. So that's staff looked at that, and they felt like we should charge for the second false alarm. Mostly commercial customers are the ones that they're frequent violators. So as you know, it costs about $200 each time an officer goes, or actually two officers respond to calls. And it's the cost of that, and there's an opportunity cost the minute the officer is responding to the false alarm, then patrolling the streets. So it's up to the council to make that recommendation if you want to make that change. If you do make that change, we can maybe not charge for second false alarm, but third one would be the $50 added to the third one if council can choose to do that way. But
So I didn't realize that this is the same fee structure for both residential and commercial.
Oh, yes.
Is there a possibility that their change only be applied to, say, residential users for the first and second even?
I probably should ask Deputy Strange, maybe he has, to me, I think we can do that.
I wish I could answer that. I don't think I can, though, because right now it is set up as one alarm program that addresses all. So we would have to go back to the vendor to see if that's something that they could take on, and I don't know what the fee structure would be for that.
I understand. I mean, my comments were directly concerning residential users as they're not similarly situated with resources that, say, for example, a building owner might be. I mean, but whereas $50 might be nominal to a building owner, for a single parent with children, $50 might mean some groceries that week. So I guess I should direct my concerns or my comments toward the fee structure. I don't know if in other jurisdictions they have different fee structures for commercial users versus residential. Do you know?
I don't know, but just to clarify and maybe address this to a certain degree, I think Natish referred to 11% difference. The 11% is in the total collected fees. Only 11% come from our residential violators in this program, at least in this last 12 months.
Well, it's my concern still to protect my ultimate concern is to protect the residential personal home alarm systems. And so it would be my recommendation to the council that the book of fees be amended to allow for the first and second alarm to be fee-free, and the third to be $150, which is still a decrease from the existing $200. So it does remedy a little bit of the burden on families, but at the same time, the repeat offenders who are 3 and above will get the $250 fee. Is that what I understand? Is it fourth and above is $250?
Yes, what you're proposing would allow for that graduated sanctioning.
Yeah, it's still a little higher than other jurisdictions, but if it allows, for at least, a little bit of leeway, that it would impact the folks who would have the most trouble, I'd feel more comfortable with that.
Just a little bit of counterpoint. And I know we still have to have the public hearing, so I have some other comments for after that. But with regard to this, would it be possible to approve the book of fees and just hold that one out until we get more information? Because for me, I need to understand if it's $200 per call, and the book of fees is supposed to help cover costs. I mean, I think that's we're supposed to be appropriately covering costs of things that are above and beyond. So I just feel like I would, in this case, would need to have a little more information about the impact. That's a lot of, I mean, I had no idea that there were that many false alarms, and that's a lot of time for our hardworking police department to be, and I'm guessing there's fire as well. I'm not sure if this is just the PD, is this just the PD?
Just the
Yes.
PDP, sorry. So it just seems like knowing how much we need the PD to be working the whole city to have this be a distraction in some way, but I feel like it needs to get covered, the costs need to get covered. So I think I just would need a little more information and context.
Well,
So I don't know if we can just pull that one piece out and approve everything but that piece, or that makes it too awkward.
We can. I would suggest then that you act on the resolution tonight for all the other parts of it, but you continue this particular one to a date certain.
Okay.
And there'd be a separate resolution then that would be for this particular fee.
Nat-
So if you wanted to continue it to the next meeting or a meeting in November, for example.
If I could just ask one clarifying question?
Yeah.
Is it, would the costs be offset or would it be an equal revenue, not revenue, the structure, if the $50 were switched to the third alarm call, I mean, would we be at a loss at that point?
Of 351 calls for second false alarm. So that's 351 false alarm for second offenders, 351 violators, so that would be the cost.
But if that cost was shifted to the third, and there was 150 for the third calls, would it be a wash, or would we be at a deficit?
I honestly think we would need to study this a little bit more using the data that we have, just to extrapolate those numbers out to make something that looks more reasonably predictive.
All right, is there an issue with charging residential, commercial different? Is that, are there any issues with that?
No, the issue is that you cannot subsidize, so we couldn't charge more for commercial to make a gap that arises because we charge less for residential. Yes, so if you differentiated, you could not increase the commercial charge enough to make up the lost revenue from the residential. But if you just say commercial's gonna go up and residential isn't, that's okay. They are not the exact, they're not the exact same situation, so I think you can make a distinction between commercial and residential. That makes sense. You just can't subsidize one with the other. So you leave it would be a general fund hole that would result.
So it would be a net loss then?
Well, if you increase the third alarm fee by enough to fill that revenue gap, might not be a $50 increase for the third alarm, though. It might have to be
Maybe
a
higher.
$75 increase. It would depend on how many third alarms there are versus how many second false alarms. But that's something that they could.
So if we were completely covering the cost, it would be $200 per any false alarm. So we're already giving, I mean, there's already something being covered by the, and I just want to be corrected if I'm wrong. There's already kind of a gimme in terms of our budget covering the first and right now, the second false alarm. So we're already we're subsidizing the false alarm issue. Is that correct? I'm
Yes.
just- Okay.
First violation, it's 1,100, basically 1,100 violators you're subsidizing right now from general fund, because you're not charging those customers. So this will add another 351 to it.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, I'd like to see figures that would show the first and second alarm being free, and say, for example, the third alarm 200, and then the figures of 250 versus, because right now we have it as the third false alarm being 200 and every subsequent being 200. I'm just wondering how it would pan out, because what I really want to do is direct the penalties to those people who are repeat offenders, not people who make a mistake and now are, facing what might be relatively steep penalties for a second false alarm. Understanding the need to ensure that we are recovering the fees.
Okay. All right, so let's, on to public hearing and come back for discussion. All right, so let's open this matter to public hearing. This is a time when any folks would like to say about this particular agenda item or for you to come up and talk about it. Seeing none, back to council for deliberation. All right. Cindy.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So I think my question's actually more about the future, and I really appreciate the work that's been done by all the departments, because I know this isn't an easy exercise to actually come up with the cost, but we know from the analysis in the back, there has been over the course of the last 4 years, a few $1 million that we weren't adequately charging fees to cover the cost. So my question regarding our principal is avoidance of large increases from time to time by adopting smaller annual increases. So is our plan going forward to look at this more regularly?
Yes, actually, we're going to be annual visit, revisit,
Okay.
yeah, annual analysis of these fee schedules. As you know, PERS increases are annual, so we need to do annual updates.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Any further comments?
No, thank you.
All right, so looks like we have a motion to make. So is the idea to hold the security alarm piece from this and continue that matter? So the resolution would be to,
So you would be adopting Resolution 1760 with the exception of the police alarm, false alarm fees.
of the
And that
security.
one, I would suggest that you continue that particular piece to a date certain.
Okay,
How much time do I need?
that would be the motion.
To, when do you want to continue it to? It could come back
in November 1st?
You've got to come back as quickly as November 1st, or do you want to make it the second meeting in November? The 18th of November.
November 18th.
11/18?
Yes.
Okay, continue to 11/18. Okay, so item on security alarms will be
15th.
continued?
15th.
15th. sorry.
15, yeah,
15th, okay. All right,
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, and I'll second.
okay, motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. All right, on to item number 13, which is a continuation of the public hearing and consideration of Resolution 17-7, amending the City of West Sacramento water and sewer connection fees, amendment of the city's books and book and fees, and consideration of Resolution 17-44, approving the water and sewer master plan updates. Mr. Bloomberg.
Hello. Yeah, tonight's items deal with the final steps in the update to the water and the wastewater master plans, including the final financial actions. Tonight, we do have Rick Simonson and John Farnkoff from HF&H who are going to talk to you a little bit about how we arrived at the recommended connection fee amounts. Of course, earlier this year, we did have workshops where we covered some of the background on how we were approaching those connection fees. So I won't go into a lot of detail. We've got a PowerPoint we're going to go through with you, but I know that you'll have questions. So we do have the public hearing, and then questions that you may have, and the consultants will be available. Vin Kay from Public Works, if you have questions about the master plan. I wanted to point out that when you adopt the master plans, you're adopting them substantially in the form that's on file with the clerk and on the city's website. I just wanted to note that what's going to change is that there would be the addition of an executive summary, which is now missing. It's there in the table of contents, but we'd also add a financial chapter. And that would be all the work that's been prepared, both for the rate increases and for the connection fees. So with that, I'll hand it off to John.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, good evening. I'm John Farnkoff, and with me is my colleague, Rick Simonson. We have a brief presentation for you. We've had these workshops, and I think you got a pretty detailed staff report that included a copy of our report, and we don't want to belabor things too much, but I think, for those who may be watching at home, just to remind everybody, I think it was May when we talked to you last, get started here with just reminding people, connection fees it's a one-time charge that is paid to reimburse ratepayers for the cost of capacity that they incurred to enable people to connect. You can't connect unless there's capacity there waiting for you. So it's paid once at the time of connection. There may be additional increments later that would be charged if there was a remodeling that increased the need for capacity. The way we calculate the connection fees is by following the law. It's the Mitigation Fee Act, Government Code 66,000. That law is not specific as to the formula for calculating the fees, but it does require that the fees be based on the reasonable costs of the facilities that provide the capacity for growth. The city last studied the water connection fees in 2005 and sewer in 2007, and there were some periodic CPI adjustments. So I'm going to let Rick take you through the water connection fee now, and then I'll follow up with the wastewater.
Evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Again, Rick Simonson with HF&H Consultants. And I'll just quickly walk through kind of the math, the calculations behind the connection fee, first for the water. It is the cost of capacity, as John mentioned, so we start with what is the cost? What is the replacement cost new of the system? In total, and I'll go some details into some of the line items, but in total, we're saying we've calculated a $433 million value to the water system. And to calculate the rate per EMU, which is equivalent meter unit, we divide that $433 million by the 47,000 odd EMUs to get to 9,145. Now I want to break down just a few of the line items. The most significant is the buried infrastructure, the pipeline. So we work with city staff and the consultant, engineering consultant, to understand the miles of pipe within the ground and the different diameters and the cost, current cost to replace those pipes if need be. And also the other infrastructure such as your pump stations, your storage tanks, a portion of the water treatment plant is included in that other infrastructure line. And that is by taking the actual cost at the time of construction, escalating that using the construction cost index up to today's dollars to get that replacement cost new. The land that those are infrastructures, the storage tanks, the water treatment plant occupy is also included in the total cost for capacity. Now, I said a portion of the water treatment plant because in 2002 there was an expansion of that plant and a bond was issued over the 2002, 2003, and subsequently refinanced in, I believe, 2012. So we have not included the full cost of the water treatment plant because it has not been fully paid for. So we do only include that retired debt service. And that's what's shown about the $43.7 million. So that's the other portion of the water treatment plant that is there in the retired debt service. And we're also looking over the next 5 years. What is the capital costs for improving the facilities over the next 5 years? So we have a true cost of providing capacity for both your existing customers as well as your future customers. And we divide by the total EMUs to get a per EMU cost of $9,145. And we do make a couple adjustments. As I stated, the outstanding debt service we have not included because that'll be paid in the future and that it will be covered by rates, as well as developer contributions. These smaller pipes within subdivisions have been contributed by developers that are only benefiting those subdivisions, not the entire system, so we back those out so we're not double counting. Again, so that's how we arrived at the $9,145. Next slide. So the $9,145 is for your basic single-family 3/4-inch customer, which is about 350 gallons per day. And that's the benchmark, the equivalent we use. And the larger meter services are a multiple of that baseline of 3/4 inch. For instance, if you have a 1-inch meter, you can get about 67% more water flow through that meter in any given minute of full flow. And it's graduated as you get the larger sizes. So the larger sizes, you're getting more capacity from the system, so you have a higher charge. So it's all based on that equivalent meter unit. And that's increasing from about 7,900 currently to 9,145, which is about a 16% increase. And these were last looked at about 12 years ago. So there were some periodic CPI adjustments in there, but not each and every year, as well as more of the accumulated debt service has been paid over time, so it has to be included in this fee as well to pay back the current ratepayers. And there is one change to the structure. Currently, the multifamily and mobile home parks are paying on a per dwelling unit basis. We're putting everybody on the same, just like you have single family, commercial, and industrial. It's just based on the capacity that you need, which is reflected in the size of the meter that you have. So everyone is on that same structure now, including the mobile homes and multifamily. So that's the one structure change that we're making. Next slide. So the $9,145, how does it compare to your neighbors? It is difficult to compare. It's not always apples to apples. As I said, you hadn't last looked at yours in about 12 years, so some of these communities may not have looked at theirs in 12 years or more. So I just want to caution you there. But even with this adjustment, you're not changing your position within the jurisdictions that we did look at, higher than most, not as high as Davis or Lincoln. So it is sometimes difficult to do a direct comparison, but this gives you an idea of where you were in compared, and now with the adjustment as well, you're not changing positions. And I believe next slide, we can get into the sewer. And it's done much of the same analysis, but I'll let John talk about a few of the nuances with the sewer.
I don't know if you have any questions about water before I go into wastewater. We can keep going and then take questions later.
Keep going.
Okay, all right, we'll keep rolling here. All right, so on the sewer side of the infrastructure, the valuation basis is the same as it is for water. We look at the replacement cost. We deduct the estimated developer contributions to get the net cost. We have the same number of equivalent dwelling units, which is the equivalent meter unit. value, which we divide into the total value. We make these calculations just for the city's facilities. The treatment, the capacity, the cost of capacity for treatment now is provided by Sacramento Regional. That is not included in this. They derive those amounts for you. So these reflect just your connection fees for your facilities. Next slide, please. What we have here is compares the current with the proposed fees. You will notice first that the fee structure is pretty much the same. There is one change. What we've recommended here is that the current structure, which bases the charge on the number of bedrooms, where one bedroom is 80% of a single-family residence, and two is 90%, and then three or greater is equal to a single-family residence. What we've recommended here is using a single 75% factor for all multifamily connections. This will enable you to be consistent with the Sacramento regional charges, and that's, having a consistent story for developers, I think, just simplifies things for everybody. It's a slight benefit, I guess you might say, to the multifamily, but if you look at what's really going on with a multifamily dwelling unit is they typically are smaller, not as many bedrooms, as you might find with single family, may have less occupancy. They just may not produce as much wastewater, and when you do flow studies, you might find factors down in the 60%. So we believe 75% is a pretty good number. It's been good enough for Sacramento Regional. You look like you're on the verge of asking a question.
No, please proceed.
Okay, all right. I didn't want to keep rambling here. Okay.
No.
On the commercial side, when we presented this to you in an earlier workshop, we presented one approach to this, which would be to base the charges on equivalent dwelling units for not just the residential, but also for commercial and industrial. It might have simplified things in some ways, but it actually was not something that the staff was comfortable doing. They prefer to stick with this approach right now that bases the charge for commercial and industrial on land use types, and that's an okay way to do it. It's a little more complicated, but because they're used to doing it, that's helpful. But what we did was update the wastewater production numbers. We don't know when that was last looked at, but what we did this time around was we used the same values for wastewater production per 1,000 square feet that the engineers, West Yost, used in the calculating the values for the wastewater master plan. So now we're consistent with those values. But you'll see there's a fairly significant increase in the proposed commercial and industrial fees. And again, I think, well, it could be 20 years or more that the current values were derived, and there may have been some policies at the time to reduce them for growth management purposes. We don't know how they were derived, so we really can't explain the difference, but these right now are all consistent with what's in the master plan. Next slide, please. Here's a comparison with the same cities that we looked at for water. Here we have two sets of connection fees, one for the north and one for the Southport areas. These fees that we're showing you here are the full fee in all of these jurisdictions here for both collection and treatment. So what you see there, the green bars for West Sacramento are the values that we derive for collection, plus the two charges that Sacramento Regional has in the North and Southport areas. And that's for a single-family dwelling unit. So that concludes our presentation. We can answer any questions you have.
Okay, any questions? Yeah, I have just a quick one. So on the, on these comparisons, I understand that it's difficult to compare different jurisdictions because we don't really know the state of their water or sewer systems, and they could be on the verge of having to go through whole-scale refurbishing that would greatly escalate their costs. So we don't know that. So, but in terms of how this gets down to the actual consumer level, that's kind of where I think, we hear most of the pushback on any kind of fee increase, because I know we've all received calls of some of the water increases, and it's $4 to some folks, and it's a lot of money. So that's, I think our conversation on past council meetings has been to make sure the infrastructure is fit right to what we're trying to do, and not, so much that it increases costs to the consumers. And I think that has been addressed in this, as far as I can see.
Let me kind of take a stab at that one. It was kind of interesting when I was presenting some of these concepts back when we were doing the workshops to the West Sac Chamber. One of our local developers said, Paul, what we look at is the all-in cost, not one fee or another, but cumulatively, what's the total? And in thinking about that, I had to do, for my own use, just what's a sample single-family household in terms of the components of fees as a percentage of a total, and then what impact this will have. And one of the scary things is there's no typical household, because everything that I've been looking at in terms of development out there is vested, and so many of the fees go back to the 1990s. So there's no sample, but I took a stab at it, and for a single-family home coming in with today's fee schedule, the water's about 10% of the total that they pay, and that total is, impact fees, building and engineering fees in total. And the wastewater's about 5%. So when you look at that increase, it needs to be taken in context of water's a big component, 10%, but you have to put it in that scale. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
Paul,
Yes, Councilor.
thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I mean, how do we explain to the community that, in that figure 19, that, our sewer connection fees are relatively higher than everyone else in the region? What's the short answer?
Well, actually, John, you had a good explanation of that. I was going to let you cover that question. Yeah.
Let me see if I can remember it. You know what, there are a variety of factors that account for the differences in connection fees. One is just simply, are they all contemporaneous, or are some of them really old and haven't been updated in a long time? That often explains some of the difference. The size of the systems can make a difference. Economies of scale sometimes play a part, so I'm not surprised to see Sacramento towards the lower end. There are other decisions, policy decisions that sometimes are made to discount the fees somewhat, again, for growth management purposes, I will say. When you look at the consumer here, the initial consumer, I guess you would say, is a developer, but ultimately it is somebody, a homeowner, or somebody who's purchasing that building. And the cumulative impact of the impact fees on the price of housing is something that cities will look at and sometimes realize that they just have to back down a little bit just to keep housing affordable. So that kind of policy is perfectly allowable here. What we've done here is we've calculated the amounts that you would not want to exceed. It'd be hard to explain that, but you could come in lower than this. Sometimes you'll also see communities that have decided to transition the increase in their connection fees. So what you see right now may not be what it's going to look like in 2 or 3 years. There could be some fairly steep increases.
Does the South River Pump Station at all interact with these fees, or is that completely separate?
Councilwoman Roscoe, are you asking about a wastewater pump station or water?
They're like regional sand, or for example, the station over off of South River Road, does that interact in any way with these fees, or is that completely separate, funded by regional sanitation?
Well, that last graphic shows collection and treatment, so that's included. As far as any increases tied to regional sand, that's going to be separate from whatever we're proposing with the conveyance system.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything further? Sure.
Yeah, I recall in the workshops that we were grappling with the need to cover the cost of infrastructure and remain competitive, but we need to have good systems in place, and we need to be able to finance them. So while it's in a way hard to see this, it's also kind of, it ends up weighing on us as the responsible thing to do, to actually have the cost of the system covered through these fees. So I think that's, and it sounds like this has gone out to our business community, and we've gotten some input and understanding from the developer. That's what it sounded like to me, Mr. Blumberg. So I think that's important, and it sounds like that's been done.
Well, the one thing we have been out to the community in terms of the policies leading up to what the proposed connection fees are. We haven't been out there kind of letting the community know the extent of the adjustments. We could certainly do that if you desired before you take an action. But I would say that one of the issues that I found is that, again, one of the things we're looking at is these increases are going to affect future developers who are not in the pipeline. And so many of our developers, even subdivisions down in Southport like Yarborough, Port Town, River Park, they all have vesting. And so the number of folks it's going to impact is at this time small compared to the folks who have locked in their connection fees already.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so we'll go ahead and open up the public hearing on this matter. This is an opportunity for folks in the audience who'd like to address this agenda item. Seeing none, back to council for further deliberations. Any additional comments? Yeah, I just have one brief comment. I think what we've been trying to do is, the city residents expect us to maintain our infrastructure and make sure that we pay for it and not allow it to become so decrepit that it becomes more of a problem in the future. And I think through the course of planning for these two adjustments, I think we've kind of focused on making sure that the infrastructure is correct for the size. It's not overdoing the infrastructure to the extent it increases cost, and also to try to remain competitive in the region. So housing is a big issue. Housing costs is a big issue, and this is just one additional fee that's going to increase the cost of housing in the future. But considering the housing costs of other parts of the region, this, I think, may be more than offset by, just the general value of properties outside the region. So I feel that West Sacramento would still be competitive, even with these, in terms of new development moving forward. So there is any further questions, or is a motion on this item?
So moved. I removed the recommended action, sorry.
Okay.
Second.
There's a motion made, second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. All right. Thank you for your presentation. All right, on to City Council calendar.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Johansson and members of the City Council. A couple of things that are coming up, not too closely, but in November, there was a Bear Crop Science Volunteer Day at Elkhorn Park that was previously scheduled for October 13th, but due to the smoky conditions in the area, That's now been moved to November 28th. Also coming up at the end of November, tentatively scheduled for November 30th will be the unveiling of the Federico Diaz sculpture on the Riverwalk over by the barn. And then on December 1st, we have our big Winter Wonderland tree lighting at City Hall.
All right, thank you. City manager report.
Just briefly, I wanted to introduce two new staff people that are in Denix's shop. Gary Predo is back there. Gary, why don't you stand up and we'll introduce you. Comes from the state of Washington, joined Denix's team. And then Bill Roberts has been with us for almost a month now, I think, right? Almost 2 months. I didn't mention him when, at our last meeting, but we welcome them to the staff. Brian Johnson and Chief Hyman have also been keeping us informed of the wildfires. We've got the OES rig is in Sonoma with a crew of 4 firefighters, and they're expected to be back next week. PD has sent 2 officers to Yuba County, but they are back now. And Paul Hosley, our communications person, is assisting the fire PIO in Santa Rosa and is expected to be back next Monday. So we're monitoring that, and both Brian and the chief have done a great job in terms of opportunities for us to train over there, workload permitted in terms of what we're doing here. Thank you to the 3 of you for attending the Greater Sacramento Press Conference today. That proposal for Amazon, which includes the Biggs District site, will get submitted supposedly tonight. It has to be done by tomorrow. In addition to that, the Mayor's Bloomberg Challenge, which we've talked about a couple times, John Robinson is here. I mean, he might be working on it. That has to be submitted on Friday, so we're working hard on that. So that concludes my announcements.
Great, thank you very much. All right, city attorney report?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Staff direction from city council members? Seeing none. All right, any future agenda item requests?
No.
Seeing none. All right, so there is last time is a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion made, seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, closed.